All right, well, we're get this meeting going. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Jen, will you do a roll call, please?
Tom McDonald,
Here.
Len Tucci,
Here.
Jennifer Finley, here, Jim Molitor,
Here.
Carol Langford, Terry Pitts, Bing Matt, Ellie Bundy,
Present.
Martin Charlo, Mike Dawson, James Steele Senior. Mike Dawson is running late.
Thank you, Jen. Ellie, would you start us out in a prayer this morning?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Creator, today we ask that you be with this council as we make the decisions needed for our membership. We ask that you watch all of those who have lost loved ones and are struggling. Please be with them and comfort them. And we just want to thank you for all of the beautiful blessings in our lives, and that we don't take any of those for granted. And again, just ask that you be with us today. Len Lynch.
Love them, Shelley. Okay, we have minutes from November 20th for review.
Mr. Chairman?
Good, Len?
Yeah, just one small correction in regards to the section where John and I's come in and talking about the both powwows. On the second sentence, if it can read Len Tucci, let John know that there was a new Elmo powwow committee rather than Arlie.
Thank you, Len.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve with corrections.
Motion by Len to approve the November 20th Tribal Council minutes with corrections. Second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those, show of hands. Ellie, did you vote? Okay, unanimous. Okay, we have today's agenda. Any additional changes or items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the council, this morning I asked Chief Couture to come in and give us an update on an incident that took place last week. It'll be an executive session.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes to the agenda? Go ahead, Jen.
Well, I had 3 walk-ins. I'd have one open with AJ Bigby. Then I have a quick executive with Mark from Lands, and then Chief Couture in executive.
Okay.
Motion to approve the agenda with additions.
Motion by Len to approve today's tribal council agenda with additions. Second by Jennifer. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. I see Martin's on now. Okay. Well, let's start out with the open session one. AJ. Okay, the crew. I see AJ. Yeah, you got a whole entourage there, buddy.
Actually, it's my daughter. Well, good morning, Councilman McDonald and the rest of the council. I hope you all are staying warm. My name is AJ Bigby, and I am coming in just to introduce and not take too much of your time. As you know, next week is the Indian Ag Conference, and my daughter, Brandy, is one of the contestants that was chosen out of the United States to go and represent Two Eagle River School for her essay on food insecurities. So I'll let her introduce herself, and just so you have a face to her name.
Well, welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Brandy Bigby, and I was chosen for the IAC Ag Conference stuff. Just wanted to see
Just
how. Hi.
I would like to add some more into this. When I talked to Brenda Ritchie about this, there were over 60 applicants, I believe, and there were the two tribal members from here that were awarded the essay contest, and they were both on food sovereignty and meat processing type stuff. And so it's pretty exciting. The last students that went down to the IAC through the essay contest was over 10 years ago. The late Councilwoman Matt, she was always adamant about getting tribal members back, the youth back into ag, and really wanted the students in that get involved. She was really an advocate to try to get people from Two Eagle to get FERTEP and that into Two Eagle through the extension office. And now we've got some feet in the door. Some other the students are going to be getting excited to do this, seeing what they can get accomplished by putting in essays and doing a little bit of extra hard work. So that's very exciting. With that said, Tribal Lands has reached out on the request of the FERTEP agent and Anita's role with her involvement with FERTEP and ag, why she served on council and when she was in our office. And plus she was a member of the IAC for years and a big advocate for them. We were hoping that we could get the picture off the wall of Anita to honor her at this meeting. A lot of the national members in that know her. We have reached out to the family and they said that would be okay if it was okay for council to let us take the picture. One of the students will be carrying in the tribal flag. The other student will be carrying in Anita's picture to represent, and that'll be placed on during the flag walk, and it'll be placed on stage during the opening ceremonies.
Oh, that's really great. Consensus of council? Absolutely.
And the other reason I have not only AJ to represent his daughter up here, but Zanin too, they both were awarded MSU extension scholarships too, to go down to the conference, just specifically for the meat processing, and stuff that are doing down there, and a bunch of other of the conference. So they have a full ride scholarship that didn't pay. They paid for a hotel room and board. So, and I'll be attending too for the meat processing.
Nice. Did part of the scholarship give you some gaming money or?
Probably.
Yeah, but 50% has to go to council.
Well, congratulations, everyone. How exciting. Good job.
So thank you so much for your time.
Yes. And congratulations on being an essay winner.
Thank you.
Having two from here is great. What a cool deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quick comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Lynn.
just wanted to congratulate Ms. Bigby for stepping up, because food sovereignty is, as you probably noticed, has become an issue that we really are starting to pay attention to. So thank you for the work that you've done, and we're really grateful that you're representing us over there at the conference.
Yes,
And
of course.
enjoy the time over there.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Travel safely. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry.
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was gonna say, and Kayleen Howard has the flag for both of them to carry.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, AJ.
Her essay was published both the students' essays were published in the Charcusta the last few weeks. So if you'd like to take a read on that, it's published in Charcusta. And thank you for your time.
Super.
All right, what a good way to start the day.
Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brandy, very excited and proud that we're getting young people involved. I've been to your place and saw your collage of different animals, and the rooster's still doing well. He's a very proud one. And I think that if there's any opportunity to expand to get you involved in ag down the road, it'd be very, very promising for the tribe. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Welcome.
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, what day are you reading your essay down there? Is that what's gonna happen? Or do you know?
As of now, they haven't done the top finalists. The top 4 in the nation will be awarded that.
Yeah, because I'll be down there during this time at a housing meeting, but I told the other girl, you know, if they happen to do presentations, I'd like to be present when they do that. So maybe Terry can send me the agenda, because we'll be down there for the egg too.
Yeah, I believe Wednesday is a pretty important day to be present.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Have fun.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
He's going in.
Yes, I'll need to go into executive.
Okay, we'll move into executive session.
And just, it was, it was just phenomenal to see. And I think back, it's like, why haven't we been doing this in the past years? And not really realizing until you actually see the homeless people out there, the ones that don't really have a place to go, and for you guys to do what you did. Not only that, you guys went above and beyond, and were providing a hot meal, giving them gloves and hats and everything they needed during that time. I was just really I just want to commend you guys for the work you guys done, because I know it takes a lot of effort and planning, Patty, and I thank you for that. And I'm hoping that at some point in time, once we start to get things figured out, we can have something like this in every community, rather than having to switch from building to building. And I understand the reason for having to do that, but in the future, I'm just hoping that we can, do that in every community. But I just really want to commend you guys for the work you've done, because there are so many people that were so appreciative of that. And, yeah, it just really touched my heart to see what we were doing what you guys were doing for the people.
So I want to say I can't take credit for all of that. It really is the dedicated people over at DHRD making that happen, and Corky, his willingness to open up Quicksilver while we were getting other spaces available. So when it began at Quicksilver, it was a true warming center, open from 8 at night till 8 in the morning. We have extended the hours now to 24 hours. So it's open 24/7 at the senior center in Ronan. We're really kind of looking at the occupation, what's the use rate and what does that look like? And then we'll determine if we need to look at opening somewhere else. But DHRD has really wrapped their arms around this and made it happen. And just some very dedicated employees who care and want to take care of our homeless people that are out there. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the council, they definitely need to be acknowledged for this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Len, for bringing that up. All right, Corky, what do you got for us?
Hey, so we came in a little over budget on our bus barn garage
no.
doors. We do have the funding to cover it.
In your wallet, or are you talking mine?
Yeah. So, we had, ordered these doors, garage doors back in 12 of 21. And when they came in and arrived in July, they were a lot higher than that. The invoice has come from the garage door company, not the contractor. So we got the original the original invoice from him stating that it was $53,000 more than what it was bid out. We do have the funding to pay for that from that fund, because we end up using 2 grants to pay for this, for funding to enclose that whole bus barn area. So now the job is finished, and so we need to pay the contractor. So, and all the doors work, everything is done with the project. We just need to pay the contractor, which is R&R Construction. And it's the amount that's $53,000 to pay them. So just here to get it approved to move forward.
Go ahead, Patty.
And I just want to add that it's already gone through contracts and grants for approval before we came here for your approval.
Okay. Any questions? No? Motion by Jimmy to approve the payment for the garage doors. Second by Terry. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Corky, I believe we're going to see a lot of these issues come to council because we ordered some months ago and the cost of everything's going up. Be nice to see if there's kind of a percentage. And Ruth, I was going to bring this up with Ruth here. How do we kind of anticipate how much everything's going up? So when we make these, do these projects, that we kind of bid them out according to the increase. But I appreciate the work you're doing and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what the percentage is. Most of the projects have come in pretty close to what the budget was for. This one was just so timeline. When we waited 9 months to receive the doors, and then they just came in, and we knew there was going to be an increase on the price. At that time, didn't know what the increase would be. So at that time, I didn't know. So.
Thank you, Corky. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous. I also want to give you an attaboy, Corky, for your shop there. The first time I took a car in to get repaired, and Mr. Webster and crew did a wonderful job. And I got to tell you, the price is right. I mean, it is. They do good work and cheaper than other folks can do it. So.
Well, thank you. And we work with a lot of DHRD clients that are getting their cars fixed over there too. So it does save the program's money moving forward too, or the elders program. So we try to do the best we can.
Oh, yeah, that's a good crew you got there.
Yeah, so just so you know that that was a transit shop, we are able to do work from that shop through our funding agency. That's okay to do that. So that money just gets put back into the program. So
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you.
Good deal. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
All right, let's see, Brad and Mark, you're up. What do you say? You got a face for radio or what?
See, the entourage is for, not AJ, it was for Zane and his entourage to make him feel better every time, so we had to bring everybody again. Morning, Mr. Chair and Council. So first item up is on your guys' page 7 of the packet. Tribal Lands has had a request from a home site lessee that wants to get approval to have a fifth wheel trailer on the property, so her son can live in it. She says it's not a permanent residence, but we did explain to her it is considered a permanent residence if they're using the facilities and are staying in there longer than 7 days. So that was what was discussed with her, and I said the only way that we can allow anybody to be living in there long term, knowing the housing market and everything else that's out there, would have to come into council for approval. Since the pandemic and the housing crunch, Tribal Lands has kind of turned a blind eye on that part of the policy of kicking people off just for that. They have to get permission first. They can't have water and sewer hookups to it or anything. It's just that they can have a place to stay. We do monitor them. We do check places for it and let them inform them to know that, you know, they're tribal members, you know, tribal families, not just anybody can pull a fifth wheel on tribal property. So at this time, this individual does have one out there. Her son is living out there who is a tribal member and has done some remodel of the place. They're not hooked up to water and sewer, just a power cable for him to have heat. He does stay there the majority of the time, but not full time. But I did inform her the only way she would get into compliance is if she had an approval from council.
Question.
Go ahead, Lance.
So Rosemary is an elder, correct?
Yes, I believe she is over the age of 65.
So you consider a wheeled vehicle a dwelling?
They consider if it's going to be affixed to the property at full time and it's not going to be leaving anywhere else under the ordinance, they consider that, you know, as long as people are living in it, that's the concern, because they have the facilities that they could be dumping sewage and that gray water out on the land. They did inform us that he does not use any of that out there. He doesn't cook out there, nothing. He does all that in the house. He just stays out there.
So it's just a sleeping quarters?
Yes, sleeping quarters.
The wheels are still on it?
Wheels are still on it, yes.
Are they hook it up to electricity, I assume?
Yes, that's it.
But that's it? That's the only utility? I don't have any problem with it. Go ahead, Carol.
I think this day and age, when there's such of a shortage of housing, we'll probably have a lot more people doing this and not asking, so I'd rather make it available to people, but also make sure that the gray water and the sewer water is not damaging anybody else that might be close. You know, if they are utilizing the facilities within the trailer, that would be my only concern, but I think we should give you the authority to look at these one-on-one and make the determination whether the trailer is, you know, adequate or not too old, that, you know, something bad could happen. You know, make sure you go through that process and then just approve it through your office rather than having to come in here every time.
Yeah, and no, I mean, thanks for that. Yeah, we do have a lot more and more of these that have happened over the last 2 years. We usually find out about them mostly is when the tribal member that it's allowing the person to do it gets tired of them being there and tell them to move, and then they want us to step in. But this way, as long as they're telling us and we know that's going on, we can allow them for a certain time frame and renew, kind of come in and renew it with our office or anything that would be helpful.
You can be the muscle. So if someone sets up a tent, is it the same thing?
Yeah, it is. If it's long-term tent or anything out there, it kind of falls under that same thing. We've had these issues before on home sites where family members will bring their camp trailer over and park it on their, siblings or parents or aunts or uncles' property for the summer, but they're not there the whole time. They're there, once a month, twice a month for the weekends. So we look at them, so every one of them has a different option and weighing on it. If people are not living there full time, not using the facilities in it, if they're going regularly and dumping the gray water. So we do look at them, every one case by case, but not all of them have to come in front of council for permission.
Kind of like Carol's already suggesting, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it saved the time from having to come in anytime when somebody.
Makes sense to me, yeah.
So then with that, Tribal Lands would recommend to have the authority to make determinations on having a fifth wheel or camp trailer, pull trailer to be on residence as long as they come in and get approval from the Lands Department.
Sounds good. Motion?
Make the motion. Does it have to be in policy? Do you want it, policy language to bring back or?
No, I just need the council approval. It won't have to come since the ordinance does state as long as it has council approval. So, and this will give me the approval right now to make those.
Okay,
for
I'll make a
council.
motion, Mr. Chair, to authorize this one and modify the.
Yeah, we don't have to modify any kind of policy or nothing.
This requires council approval. Motion by Carol, second by Jimmy. Discussion, questions? Go ahead, Mike.
We're just granting, the words left me. What is it? We're delegating the authority is what it is under the ordinance.
Yes. Delegating authority. Thank you.
Okay, that's correct action. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous?
Great.
You are delegated the authority to make that determination.
That will be perfect. Thank
I'm sure
you.
that's Brad's responsibility.
It will be. It is. Thank you so much. If I could sneak on two little quick ones that came in this week, so it didn't get put on the agenda request last week. We have Montana Electric Co-op, are seeking a letter of support because they're going after grants, to maintain their power transmission lines down in the southern part of Missoula County, right here. I mean, the northern part of Missoula County, southern part of the reservation. They're asking that a letter of support from CSKT because they do have a significant amount of power lines and stuff in the Evero-Shalai area. This way that if they have a wildfire again down there or any of the maintenance, cleaning or anything that to prevent fire damage, they have a grant that will actually get that taken care of, and it'll keep the cost down for any of the tribal members and non-members that have them as a power company.
So you want approval for a letter of support?
Yes, I would, I have a letter of support here. I'll leave with Jen, so
Okay,
you can take a look at it
Okay.
to sign off on.
okay. Motion by Jimmy to approve the letter of support for the Montana Electric Co-op. Second by Mike. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? I think it's unanimous.
The last item up that came in, this is just an informational to tribal council that the Fish and Wildlife Program requested to use the Ronan Senior Center. Peyton Alexander had talked me yesterday. They want to do a check station so anybody getting big game animals coming through, the tribal members coming through, they can go in and get them checked for CWD or anything. They were just going to be using the senior center parking lot. I just wanted to bring it in. Me and Louis felt that it didn't really, we are allowed to do the permitting in that. We're not doing a permit since it is a tribal government function here that they're doing. and a service for the tribal members to monitor the animals. We just wanted to give the update to council that if you go by there this weekend or anything or here, that's what the tent is and that's what those individuals are doing. They'll be doing that on the weekends. And I don't know for how long, but he said that they would be liking to set up in the more southern part towards the Terrace Lake Road area. And we just would be informing the people at the senior center for the warming center that they need to be parking further to the north of the building so they have plenty of room where that tent and that will be.
Cool.
So I just wanted to give an update on that one.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep. I do have another one that I can come back at the end of the day was the Gonzalez issued, the lease, the home site lease down in Chief Martin Charlo. I can bring that back up, at the end of the day if you guys would like, or we can schedule it for another day. Since you guys are running, I know you guys are behind schedule.
Next week.
Next week.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, hey, Mark, before you leave, what's the status on that fence in Coosa?
We've been waiting for the third appraisal to go through.
Still hasn't?
We still have not got a third appraisal. The only thing we would do is if we did anything with the two appraisals that we would have, we'd have to bring it back into council to get it approved to breach the contracts and grant to go for sole source for the one individual at the lowest.
Yeah,
bid.
just asked yesterday about it, so.
Okay, okay.
Lisa, yeah, come on up. You wanted an executive session? We will move into executive session. Executive session, Jim, thank you. All right, well, we'll start our afternoon session. Good afternoon, Montana Department of Transportation. Vicki, I see you're on. You can go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us, and hopefully you can hear me. I'm sorry we couldn't be there in person, but I'm getting too old to be pushing my car out of the ditch. Anyway, Bob is there. Bob Vosen is there in person, and I'll let him introduce what's going on. And then our consultant, Sarah Nicolai from RPA, We'll do the presentation of where we're at in terms of our feasibility study on US 93 at 9 Pipe.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Bob.
All right, thank you. As Vicky said, I'm Bob Vosen. I'm the district administrator for District 1 with Montana Department of Transportation, generally the western portion of the state. And we've got with us Ben Nunnally, who is our acting pre-construction engineer. And we also have Scott Randall with RPA as part of the team that's on the call, and Sarah Nikolai with RPA will be doing most of the presentation. And this is to kind of give the latest and greatest update on what we have going on. So I'm just going to turn it over to Sarah and let her take off.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. And Chairman and council members, thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with you today. As Bob and Vicky mentioned, my name is Sarah Nikolai, and I work for Robert Hutchin Associates, and we're the consultant that was hired by MDT to help with this study. We do have a brief presentation to share with you, and so I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Okay, could you let me know if that is coming through?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's trying to come through.
I'm blinking on my end as well. I'm gonna stop and try one more time here. Okay, let's try that method. Is that coming through?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, great. So you should see our cover slide here on our tribal council presentation. Is that what you're seeing on your end?
Looks good.
Okay, very good. Well, we have a brief presentation to share with you today, and we wanted to talk about our background information from the study, the options that we developed and evaluated, our preferred option identified by the study, and then our next steps to finalize our effort. And following the presentation, we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the study. So I've talked a little bit about what we intend to accomplish with our meeting today. And so I'll start out with a summary of the study background. We did provide a presentation to the Tribal Council back in March. So some of this background information might be a little bit familiar, but just wanted to touch on a few of these items since it has been a few months since we've talked with you. So we'll start out first with a history of the study area. And back in 1996, MDT completed a final environmental impact statement and a Section 4F evaluation for the portion of US 93 between Evero and Polson. And at that time, the record of decision did not provide specific design details. So Federal Highway Administration, MDT, and the CSKT agreed to prepare a supplemental environmental study. So what we're calling an SEIS. And the intent of that was to further explore possible alignments and perform a detailed study of the effects of highway improvements on wetlands and wildlife in the corridor. And so in 2008, MDT, Federal Highways, and CSKT completed the supplemental environmental impact statement. And I'll refer to that as the SEIS as we move forward. Since that time, MDT has proceeded to develop several projects in stretches of US 93 adjacent to the 9 Pipe segment, including the post-Creek Hill segment. And they've encountered several challenges relating to things like constructability and impacts and costs. And so the intent of this study, the US 93 9 Pipe Corridor Feasibility Study, is to proactively address these challenges by identifying potential constraints and considering the viability of the preferred alternative that was identified back in that 2008 SEIS. So for the 9 Pipe segment, the SEIS identified a preferred alternative, and it consisted of a 2-lane widened roadway. And at the time of that SEIS, it was determined that a 2-lane roadway was preferred in this segment to minimize impacts to sensitive wetlands, wildlife habitat, and other resources. The preferred alternative did include wildlife crossing structures and a separated bicycle and pedestrian path. And this segment, the 9 Pipe segment, would connect to a divided 4-lane segment north of our area. So starting at Brook Lane and a northbound passing lane. segment south of Gunlock Road. And so those connecting segments are shown in black, and our study area is shown as the red portion here. We recognize that the preferred alternative represents a lot of previous work and collaboration with the CSKT. And so we used this as our starting point for our study. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process that we've used for our feasibility study. We started out with an analysis of relevant resources to identify any changed conditions since the 2008 SEIS. And we conducted updated traffic and safety analysis. We reviewed land use and ownership, wetlands, floodplains, streams, wildlife, and cultural resources. And felt like it was really important to do that kind of comparison between the updated information gathered for our feasibility study and conditions reported in the 2008 SEIS, just to confirm those previous findings and also to identify any changed conditions that might influence either the need or the feasibility of corridor improvements. And so our second portion was the feasibility evaluation. So on the screen that showed as kind of this second bubble in brown. And we've been focusing here for a while. We identified 3 corridor-wide options to improve the 9-pipe segment, and I'll share those with you in just a few minutes in our presentation. For those options, we looked at things like soils and groundwater conditions to understand constructability challenges. We also evaluated proposed structures and wildlife crossing accommodations to assess impacts and overall feasibility. And we relied heavily on input from tribal biologists, the culture committees and tribal elders, and state and federal agencies to help us identify the most appropriate structure sizing and types for each of the locations we were looking at in consideration of hydraulic conditions and wildlife crossing needs. Next, we prepared cost estimates to understand the approximate investment that would be needed for those improvements. And then lastly, we completed a screening process based on 6 criteria to compare how each option performed. And so we're now in the last step of our process, this big kind of green bubble at the end here. And so we are documenting our findings and sharing our results. And we're in the process of developing a draft feasibility report. We will publish that online. However, before we share that report with the public and hold public meetings, we wanted to meet with you first to provide this update, answer any questions, and ask for your input on the study. So on that previous slide, there were a couple of icons noting outreach activities that we conducted over the course of the study, and I wanted to point out a couple of those. Throughout the entire study, we met periodically with our advisory committee, and you can see here that's the left-hand list here. This group included MDT and tribal representatives, and they really guided our process and the methods that we used for the study. They've provided comments on our draft materials before we shared our work more broadly. We also had really robust resource agency engagement with tribal, federal, and state representatives. These are folks with expertise in wildlife, wetlands, water quality, and cultural resources. And we held 4 virtual meetings with this group, plus 1 in-person field review. And we've also been receiving written comments from this group that have directly influenced the options that were developed and how they were evaluated. I mentioned before that we've had a couple of previous tribal council presentations. So this is our 3rd presentation to the council, and we really appreciate the opportunity to provide these updates on our study. And then lastly, we've also held several public involvement outreach efforts as well. We've been providing updates, offering public meetings. We are planning to hold a final set of public meetings in January, and I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. So in terms of what we heard from those outreach activities, wanted to touch on a couple of points from the public and resource agency perspectives. First, from the public, we heard quite a few comments asking MDT to really minimize impacts to adjacent properties. Those might be residences or businesses nearby to the highway, some concerns from those property owners. Also, requests for us to consider access to those residents and businesses, so how they have access from the highway to and from their properties was a really important comment that we heard. Several folks asked how all of these improvements would be paid for, so attention to identifying potential funding sources. Several folks also wanted to make sure that we were having adequate coordination with agencies and stakeholders and reaching out to all the appropriate folks that would have expertise and interest in this study. And then lastly, we had a number of comments just asking that improvements be considered in coordination with other projects in the BI. So I mentioned the Post Creek Hill project, also the Eagle Pass Trail project in the corridor. So those were several of the comments we heard from the public. When it comes to the resource agencies, we had a lot of really good discussion with the tribal, federal, state representatives from those organizations, and a lot of discussion about appropriately sizing wildlife crossing structures and thinking about the targeted species that we're trying to address. So those species that are known to cross the highway and where those locations occur. More specifically, we had some discussion about making sure we have adequate vertical clearance, so height, and then also dry passage at crossing structures to make sure that we're encouraging use by grizzly bears and other large mammals like deer and moose and elk in the corridor. A lot of conversation about considering the cultural and traditional elements of the landscape, recognizing how important this is from a traditional cultural perspective. And then lastly, some requests to consider how we can restore the corridor by improving connectivity across the highway. So some really important comments that we heard from this group of resource agencies. So from all of that input that we heard from these groups, I mentioned that we developed 3 corridor options, and I want to walk through each of those with you. So as I mentioned, we used the SEIS preferred alternative back from 2008 as our starting point, our baseline option. And that configuration included 2 12-foot travel lanes, one in each direction, just as is provided today. It would have widened 8-foot shoulders and MDT's standard side slopes. And this alignment, again, was selected at the time instead of, say, a widened 4 or 5-lane highway to minimize impacts to adjacent wetlands and resources. This option did include a shared use path that started out on the west side of US 93 and then crossed over to the east side, somewhere in the middle. And in the figure that's shown here on the left-hand side, that shared use path is kind of just the line in dark blue here. And so you can see that crossing that was identified somewhere in the middle of the corridor. In terms of structures, so these are shown in brown on this figure. I'll start out first at the south end of the segment at the bottom of our figure here. So at the 9-pipe reservoir, the preferred alternative called for a single 660-foot bridge with 10 to 12 feet of vertical clearance, and then 2 12 by 22 foot culverts and 2 10 by 12 foot culverts. Those culverts are kind of the thin, skinnier brown lines, and then that larger bridge structure is the brown rectangle where my cursor is located. At each of the kettle ponds, kind of in the middle of our segment, kettle pond 1 and 2, each of those locations called for 2 60-foot bridges with 10 to 12 feet of clearance, and then 2 4 by 6 foot culverts. And then finally, at the north end of the corridor at Crow Creek, the preferred alternative called for 2 bridges, 120 feet and 150 feet in length, and those would have 10 to 12 feet of vertical clearance. So this was our starting point, our baseline for the study. From there, we developed a second option, and this was based on just increased knowledge of wildlife presence and movement in the corridor since the 2008 SEIS. But we wanted to look at how we might enlarge those wildlife accommodations. So just like the previous SEIS option, this configuration included 2 12-foot travel lanes, one in each direction, exactly as provided today, would also include those widened 8-foot shoulders. However, instead of MDT's standard slopes, we did include steepened slopes in some spots just to minimize impacts to adjacent wetlands and properties. Under this option, you'll note that the shared use path, so again, that line in blue, it would start out immediately on the west side, but then cross over right away to the east side, south of the 9-pipe reservoir. The point of this was to try to minimize wetland impacts as best we could, so have more room away from the 9-pipe reservoir. We also identified some areas where there's existing widened MDT roadway, right-of-way. And so in those locations, we have the path kind of weaving around the cattle ponds and also the Mission Mountain viewpoint. And again, the intent there was to minimize impacts to water bodies and separate pedestrians from traffic on the highway. In terms of those crossing locations for wildlife, I'll go in the same order here and starting out with the Nine Pipe Reservoir. So we identified a 660-foot bridge, so the exact same length as that first option. But in this case, we are including 15 feet of vertical clearance. And the intent there was to better accommodate grizzly bears and other large mammals. We included the same culverts as were identified in the preferred alternative. At the cattle ponds, a pretty big change here, we were introducing a single 800-foot bridge in both locations. And both of those would have 15 feet of vertical clearance. So it would be spanning the entire water body and connecting the two sides of those cattle ponds. No culverts in those locations because we are full spanning those cattle ponds. And then at Crow Creek, you'll see the same 500-foot bridge length, but we've introduced 15 feet of vertical clearance here, again, in an attempt to better accommodate grizzly bears. So our third option, this is our last option, and this one was developed in close coordination with tribal, federal, and state resource agencies. And the intent here was to best accommodate wildlife while minimizing impacts and costs. And the idea for this option started out with consideration of how a wildlife overpass could be incorporated and what trade-offs we could consider at those other crossing locations. And so again, with this configuration, we have two 12-foot travel lanes, one in each direction with the widened 8-foot shoulders, and then also the steepened side slopes to minimize impacts to wetlands and properties. C3, this option included the exact same shared use path alignment that we just discussed under C2. So again, starting out on the west, immediately crossing over to the east and staying on the east side and kind of following around the cattle ponds and the Mission Mountains viewpoint. In terms of the crossing structures, this is where we're seeing the primary differences with this option. So a new element here I'll point out is the wildlife overpass in the vicinity of the Post A Canal. And the idea here is that this would be similar to the overpass that's provided at Evero, but it would have an updated design to best accommodate grizzly bears and other large mammals. And we identified this location in close coordination with the resource agencies, just based on current wildlife use and some favorable topography in that spot. So with that wildlife overpass introduced, we were able to take a closer look at some of these other locations. And so, for example, at the Nine Pipe Reservoir, we reduced the length to 300 feet long. We did keep the 15 feet of vertical clearance and the culverts, but felt like that reduced length was appropriate because we had that wildlife overpass nearby. And so the combination of those two things we're hopeful would better accommodate grizzly bears. At the cattle ponds, we had a lot of discussion with the resource agencies here. They felt that there was less large mammal and grizzly bear activity in these spots. And so we were able to reduce the lengths. So we have single 110-foot bridges in each of these spots with 10 to 12 feet of vertical clearance. The idea here would be that we're trying to accommodate amphibians and smaller mammals, but that the grizzlies and larger mammals would use other spots to cross the corridor. And then lastly, at Crow Creek, we did keep the 500-foot bridge with 15 feet of vertical clearance. We heard a lot that there's lots of grizzly bear activity in this spot, and it's farther away from that overpass. So we wanted to make sure that we had a really good crossing opportunity here for those larger animals. So that brings us through the three options that we looked at. I want to touch next on the evaluation that we conducted to consider those three options. We identified a set of screening criteria. So it represented 6 key factors that are listed here on this slide, and felt like these areas would have the largest influence on both the feasibility and the reasonableness of our proposed options. And so with our evaluation, we did include some quantitative components. So for example, we were able to identify the number of acres of wetland or adjacent property impacts and the percent of floodplain spanned by each structure and the relative capital cost of each option. So we did have some numerical data. We did also evaluate some qualitative elements as well. things like changes to visual quality and anticipated use of our wildlife accommodations. We used a numerical scoring system ranging from 1 to 5. 1 indicated a fatal flaw or a failure, and 5 indicated the best possible performance in that category. So those were used a little bit more sparingly. Most of the time we were in the middle of that range from 2 to 4. We developed a detailed screening report and documented our assumptions and findings under these categories. We will be posting that report to our website before we hold our public meeting in January, and we'll be sure to share that link with you. For today, we prepared just a high-level summary of our findings in a handout, and I believe Vicki may have emailed this to you, but if not, we'll make sure that you have a copy of this. And I'll just walk through our final results with you. So you'll see here on the right-hand side, we have a column for each of the 3 options that we evaluated. And again, we were using that numerical system 1 to 5. So we color coded this. 1 is the darker red color and 5 is the darker green color, indicating the best performance. So I'll start out with option C1. So again, this is the SEIS preferred option. And this option primarily received scores of 2s and 3s in each of the criteria that we looked at. Felt like this was appropriate. It was showing kind of a relative balance of benefits and disadvantages, and felt like that supported the findings of the SEIS. We did award a score of 1. This was kind of a rare score that we gave out for adjacent properties. There was a building within the northern part of the corridor that's within the construction footprint for this option. So, it might be possible to adjust our construction footprint, but we did give it a 1 in that category. Option C2, you'll see scored a little bit better. So more of those 3s and 4s, kind of the green colors there. And this reflects the fact that we were providing more vertical clearance and we were reducing impacts to natural resources by incorporating those steep inside slopes and larger structures. So this scored a little bit better than the SEIS option. Our option C3, we felt like really optimized performance in most of these categories. And so it scored the best in most of the categories with a couple of exceptions. But overall, really felt like it was the most cost-effective option with the greatest potential for funding, and that it minimized impacts and provided the best wildlife accommodations as well. So at the very bottom, we've totaled up all of the scores that we assigned. You can see that C1 came in at 52 points, C2 at 57, and then C3 at 70. We did determine that all of these options are feasible to implement in terms of impacts, costs, and constructability considerations. However, just based on the scoring that we provided, we did find that that C3 option, our third option, did the best job of accommodating wildlife, minimizing risks for wildlife vehicle collisions, improving vehicular and pedestrian and bicycle safety, and other operations, while also minimizing costs and impacts. And so based on this evaluation, felt like it did the best job, and we identified it as the preferred option to advance for future project development. I mentioned that we had a lot of collaboration with our resource agencies through this process. We did have a chance to share this preliminary finding with several tribal biologists and other representatives, and they had indicated their support and that they also felt like this was the best option. So I want to touch a little bit on our next steps. Just a few slides left here in our presentation. I mentioned that we are in the process of developing our feasibility study report. We will be posting that draft report out to our website for a 30-day review period. I'm planning that either later this month or in January. And once that report is available, we will host 2 public meetings. So one will be virtual, and then we'll also have an in-person event. We'll make sure to send out email notifications to our email list and invite our resource agencies to participate as well. And after we hear from the public and agencies, we'll address comments that we receive and then finalize the study. So that's where we're headed in terms of next steps. But we really would love to discuss our study findings with you and answer any questions that you might have.
I couldn't quite hear, Sarah, what are the dimensions of the wildlife overpass?
Oh, yes. Great question. So I'll go back up here. We have not defined the exact dimensions yet. So the intent is that it would be similar to the Ever crossing, but we would be relying on our resource agencies and future collaboration to finalize that design in a future design phase. But basically, we took the footprint of that Ever crossing and kind of superimposed it within our corridor.
So with that particular vertical height, are you lowering the grade of the highway also?
So in that spot, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that Post A Canal location, there's a little bit of, it's kind of a cut section in the highway. So the highway already does dip down a little bit compared to the adjacent topography. So there's a little bit of advantage there already with the natural topography that we would try to take advantage of. Again, I think, that would probably come into final design as to how that would come together, but I don't think the intent is to lower that highway at all.
At that location, there is currently a parking area on the west side of the road up on top there. So it really lends itself really well to something like this. It reduce the amount of fill we have to bring in to get to that elevation. And it works really well, as Sarah said, with the natural topography out there.
I watch a deer come off that parking lot road and run right into the side of a Winnebago car going down the highway.
See, they're already trying to get over the highway right there.
Yeah, you got a hill on one side, but not really much on the other side.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than what you think when you actually take a look at it. When they first brought it up to me, I was like, kind of thinking, are we crazy for doing this? But then when you drive through it and you start looking at it, it kind of makes sense. It's of all the places, that's definitely the best.
The question on the 9-pipe bridge crossing, or the 9-pipe bridge, is that going to provide for pedestrian underpass also to get to the water's edge?
Good question. So we do have an identified crossing location where the shared use path would cross over from the west side to the east side. However, we have had a couple of comments about providing access still across the highway and other spots. And one comment came in about maybe there's a possibility of providing a crossing location near the Eagle Pass Trail intersection and connecting into that trail system to provide access to the 9-pipe reservoir. So that might be something that MDT could consider moving forward as well, just making sure that there are adequate opportunities for pedestrians to be on both sides.
And while you bring up question about pedestrian, I do want to point out on the screen in front of you, the blue line is definitely not to scale. So the path isn't going to veer. I mean, in there, it looks like we're going hundreds of yards to the east. It's not going to be that far, but if you take a look at the existing fence line that's there, there's actually, I think it's old highway 93 that curves around some of those kettle ponds and stuff that we would be kind of recapturing that route with the shared use path.
Yeah, I just know that at 9-pipe and specifically, not necessarily the kids fishing pond, the site we developed out there on Eagle Pass Trail on the west side of Highway 93. It's most of the pedestrians that want to cross the road are doing it right there at the
at Allentown.
itself. Yeah, at Allentown. So that's where they're going to try to go underneath that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's something we definitely will be considering is how can we, I mean, we've already got the bridge there. We know that we've got a need for pedestrians. I think it makes sense to be looking at that and figuring out how to make it as safe as possible for the users that we have a pretty good assumption are going to continue
Well,
to use
we
it.
don't want them fishing from that bridge, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so get them down on the edge of the water. We should build a fishing platform off the bridge.
Although the shared use path likely will be part of the same bridge, it'll just actually have a place for them to be, unlike today where they've got to be hanging onto the wooden rail as they're trying to not get hit.
And bring up some very good questions about the shared use path. I'm glad Bob pointed out that this is very exaggerated, I would say, this blue line, just so that we can see it on this figure. But a lot of additional design would need to occur, and considering some of those design details that you're talking about as well.
And another thing I wanted to just make sure everybody understood, Sarah, we engineers use the term in-slope a lot. And when we talk about the in-slope, that's just the slope from the shoulder of the asphalt down to the bottom of the ditch. So our typical we desire for is a 6-to-1, which means for every foot you go down, you go out 6 feet. So the footprint becomes pretty wide. And then basically for every, like we're talking about raising the elevation of the bridges from a 12-foot clearance to a 15-foot. Well, if we go up 3 feet, that's going to push us out 9 feet on each side for an 18-foot wider footprint of what we impact underneath it. So that's when she talked about making that change from a 6-to-1 to a 4-to-1, and in some places we'll look at others. It's just to reduce that impact to the existing ground.
So anytime you change from a 6-to-1 to something less, does that mandate then a guard?
No, a 4-to-1 is still, it's not our preferred option, but it's still, I believe, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, or Scott, the term is recoverable. So it's not going to induce a rollover. You can drive off on that slope and still come back on, come back to the road. It's when we start getting steeper than a 3-to-1 that we start having issues where we have to get guardrails.
So anything beyond a 3-to-1 is a guardrail?
I believe that's correct.
Yes, and there are some spots even where, as we're coming in tight to these bridge structures, for example, where we'd have much steeper slopes, say even a 2-to-1, and those would be locations certainly with guardrail. But just as we're trying to minimize impacts as we get right up next to a water body and we're bridging that with a structure.
What is the width of the pedestrian trail?
So I believe that's 8 feet. Scott might be able to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, it's 10 feet, Sarah.
10 feet, thank you.
Any questions from council?
And I guess one other point of clarification is, as part of with all this wildlife crossing accommodation stuff, the one thing that we didn't bring up was the use of the wildlife exclusionary fencing, and that'll be used as to basically built at the time of construction so that we are funneling the wildlife to the appropriate locations.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just going to turn to our very last slide. If you do have any questions that come up after today, encourage you to reach out to Vicki, or you're welcome to reach out to me as well. And we will be posting additional materials to our website, and we'll be sure to let you know once that draft report is available. And again, we'll be in touch as we get closer to those public meetings in January.
So the funding for this project coming out this year?
Yeah, no such luck. Oh, that's a discussion we'll have once we figure out what we're going to build, is how we can maybe work together and try to secure some additional funding similar to what we're doing with another project just down the road. I think there's some great opportunities for us to work together and figure out how to get there. I've got a few other things going on, but there definitely are some great opportunities. Hopefully we're going to get good news about the Post Creek Hill project.
I think you will be.
I'm hopeful.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you today.
Thanks, Sarah. Great job. And that presentation's concluded, but if you have time or have any other questions related to MDT, but not this specific project, fire away, I guess, while you got me here. I don't know where we are with your agenda, but If you have questions, y'all know how to get hold of me as well. We started Ronan North. That's the good news.
Yeah, saw that. Yeah,
It's pretty exciting. It's been a long time coming.
yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm from the west side, so we just have so many animals getting killed on the highway and so many cars getting crunched. Is there anything in the future about trying to protect the highway from the animals over there?
Where are we at? Specific area? Highway 28.
All of it, and 382.
Yeah, right now we don't. We've got the fencing going on down the road here a little bit, but that wildlife fencing is expensive stuff. And one of the other things that's really challenging is that a lot of times the neighbors aren't fans of it. In fact, our project manager found out all the landowners that have changed hands since we had the agreements down on the stuff we're working on now. There's several new landowners that the people that they bought from didn't tell them that, hey, I signed this agreement and this is coming, and he knows all of them now. But so that's another challenge. But no, we recognize that we're always looking for cluster areas, and then seeing if we can handle things. So if you've got some key points, you can narrow it down to some. I'd love to hear about that, and we'll see if we can find some areas. Highway 28, we really have. I don't know if we have anything planned on Highway 28. And I'm looking to see if Ben's still on. He is. He's sitting there in front of the Northern Lights.
There's a section that's right around the Bonneville power station that deer are always in that section.
Okay.
Always. And then Camas Prairie on 382 has 2 spots that elk are crossing all
Okay.
the time.
Yeah. I'll touch base with our maintenance guys and figure out where those are. We can, I can't make any promises, but we can take a look and see what we've got going on. If, at the very least, we can get some additional signage up. We've been doing some of that. We had down kind of in the Sula area, the bighorn sheep herd grew in size and decided to start wanting to become hood ornaments down there. So we're trying to work with that as well. And it isn't a great solution, but hopefully it lets people know that start looking in these areas, because we've got areas of concerns. And if we've got a herd in the area that's constantly back and forth, we do have the big reader board signs that are available to us to get set up to. We use them at Clearwater Junction's an area you may drive through to see them. A couple other places we have down at outside of T Falls, we put them up for the bighorn sheep down there, and that seems to help a little bit. Gets people to slow down. And
I did see a new bighorn sheep sign down near Permit too.
Yep.
Coming on 382.
Yep. Yeah, we put a couple on.
Appreciate that.
Yep.
So question, when you brought up the new landowners and previous agreements. So if you identify a stretch of highway that is just extremely dangerous from wildlife crossings, and you want to put up a wildlife fence or do something there to redirect that or eliminate some of that hazard, that's an optional thing for the adjacent landowner to enter into, or is that
It's a really gray area. If it's not on the interstate, the fences that's there is actually owned by the landowner, not by MDT. That's not our fence. That's the adjacent landowner's fence. So we have to have some kind of an agreement in place. What we really don't want to do is leave their fence up and build another fence and create that trapment zone where critters get in between the two and don't have a way to they can't get out. They can jump in and can't get out stuff. So, and we've ended up with that in a couple places where signed an agreement with the landlord. He's like, don't put that on my fence, on my property line. I'll take my own fence out once you get yours built, and then they don't. So there's just some nuances and some challenges. So we try to work with our neighbors and not try to impose our will upon things like that,
Terry?
Thank you. I was wondering what their complaint is. You're putting up a good fence. I'm wondering what their is.
Well, I don't know what all of the complaints are, but some of them are, that taller fence can create drifting issues. We're replacing cattle guards and putting in really big, long cattle guards. And it is a fence that in some cases, they're responsible to maintain. And so now instead of maintaining a 4-wire barbed wire fence, they've got an 8-foot wildlife fence. Oftentimes we make the agreement that we will take care of the fence in that areas, but in some of the areas, we don't have that agreement with the previous landowner, is my understanding. So could be a multitude, and honestly, there's sometimes people just don't like, they don't like that. It does hinder the view a little bit. You get an 8-foot tall fence, with big panels and stuff, and then what I've run into, not on this particular project, but I ran into it when I worked over on the Great Falls district, was we had landowners not like it because they like the deer and elk to be able to pass through their property, not get to this fence, turn around and have 200 head grazing in my hayfield. I'd rather they go across and graze in my neighbor's hayfield across the road rather than stay in mine.
Any other questions for Bob or Vicky? No? Well, keep on working.
All right, well, reach out anytime, give me a holler.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time, and everybody have good holidays.
Appreciate the cup.
All right, I got a new one coming. So thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the update. Great work. Thank you. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Oh, Terry?
Yeah, thank you. We've got a road. Do you have a Rive Creek? And you on Highway 200, just west of Dixon, about 3 miles. That road up there is a Dixon Stock Association, and that cattle guard is filled up. So is that your guys' responsibility to raise that up and clean that out, or is that the tribes?
I can't say for sure. It's on the approach that enters onto Highway 200, so it's on the right-of-way line.
No, actually, it's up Rive Creek Road about 1.5 miles, and there's association land sits there, and there's a cattle guard there, but it's filled up, and anyway, cattle are crossing it and getting down, and they come down on the highway, and we actually hit one of them.
Gotcha. So I don't believe a Rive Creek that's not a state maintained, that's a county or tribal road. I don't know which it is.
Probably county.
Probably county. So that would be, I'm not sure whose it is, but I'm fairly confident it's not MDT's. It might be tribal, it might be county, but it's that far off, it's not ours. When they're on that extended fence line, I'm going to say 90% of the time, it's not an MDT cattle guard. It's typically the adjacent landowner or the county, but we do have some one-offs here and there where we put a cattle guard in as part of a project and we agreed to take on the maintenance. But on that one, I'm fairly certain that wouldn't be ours. You bet.
Thank you, Bob.
All right.
Drive safe. All right, what we got next?
Ben?
Oh, Ben, okay. Ben Davis, come on up.
Did everybody want to take a 5-minute little quick break so I can get them set up with this PowerPoint?
Okay, 5-minute break. And, well, it'd be rude to say no, so.
Exactly.
We don't want to be rude. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Well, good afternoon, Council. It's really an honor to be here. Would the Council like me to proceed with my?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, my name is Ben Davis, and I'm the Executive Director of Friends of the Children for Western Montana. And on Zoom today, I'm actually joined by two of my colleagues and partners in this work. Sky McGinty, who's the head of All Nations Health in Missoula, as well as Tasha Friday, who's the National Tribal Program Director for Friends of the Children as part of our national network. And Friends of the Children is really focused on impacting generational change, one child at a time. Some people describe us as a poverty disruptor in terms of the work that we do. And we do this in an interesting way. We really work to build community-driven collaboration and partnerships that lift up children and families. And let's see here, I guess this is a PDF, so I'm going to scroll down. And we do this work by pairing full-time salaried mentors, we call them friends, with youth who have big hopes and dreams and unique talents, but face the most significant obstacles in our communities. And then we walk alongside the children and their families for 12 plus years, no matter what, is our motto. It's an unconditional relationship that we have with each child and family. And we start working with them when they're between the ages of 4 and 6. And we are there by their side through high school. So in Montana, we launched last year with a chapter in the Missoula area, really because there was a recognition that too many children in Montana are in crisis. I'm sure you all are very familiar with some of the challenges that children and families are facing. We have really high suicide rates. We have high rates of adverse childhood experiences. We have very high rates of children in foster care. And so with that recognition, thought leaders are wondering, how can we do this different? How can we disrupt these cycles of involvement in public systems and try to minimize and stop that trauma in children and families' lives? And so we started this work with that support and really focus on working with families who are at risk of entering the foster care system. We started by building partnerships in the Missoula area. So we work with Mountain Home Montana, if you're familiar with that organization that serves young mothers and their children. Work with the school district, as well as Partnership for Children and Watson Children's Shelter to identify children who can most benefit from our services, and then sharing programming alongside those organizations that are doing great work. We started working with our first group of children last spring, and we're currently enrolling our second group right now. So in the next week or two, we'll be serving 32 children and over 100 family members as part of our 2-generation work. And we're really focused on expanding beyond Missoula to serve rural, tribal, and frontier communities in Western Montana. And our hope is that we can continue to serve additional children in the range of 16 to 24 new children each year. And then we work with each family for 12 plus years. So this is a long-term commitment that we're making. I mentioned to you already the community partners who we're working with. And one of our other great partners is Sky McGinty and All Nations Health Center in Missoula. Sky was gracious enough to join us for this conversation today. What I think I'd like to do now is actually to turn it over to Sky, and she'd love to share with you for a few minutes about her perspectives on Friends of the Children, in particular as it relates to serving in Indigenous families in Missoula and beyond. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sky.
Thanks, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good snowy first day of December. I hope you guys aren't getting as much snow as we are down here in Missoula, but I'm sure you are, so please be safe when you guys take off today. Like Ben mentioned, my name is Azure Sky McGinty. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm an enrolled member of the Little Shell Chippewa tribe. I'm also a descendant of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes down in Fort Hall, Idaho, and I've been the executive director of All Nations Health Center for about 2 years now, and I've been a board member of the Western Montana chapter of Friends of the Children for about a year. And when I was first approached about becoming a board member for Friends of the Children, I quite honestly had never heard of the organization, but it really quickly resonated both personally with me and professionally in the services that All Nations provides because of the 2-gen model that Ben was describing. I think as Indigenous people, we know that learning and healing and lived experience doesn't happen in a silo, that it really happens across intergenerational lines. And that to me was a really attractive part about Friends of the Children, is that it is a long-term commitment for the life of that childhood. There is that consistency automatically built in to that child's life as they grow and they transition through their life. And to me, that made a lot of sense because that's something that we honor here at All Nations. We do quite a bit of youth programming specifically with their families. We try and always have that approach because, again, we know that just addressing one member of the family or one age group isn't going to have as meaningful as an impact as if you hadn't brought the entire family together. And so that was a really important sticking point for me when considering being on the board and meshing our services together with Friends of the Children is that approach to, I think, really decolonizing how our children move through the school system and what it takes for them to be successful. Also noticing that our Native American students are probably the ones who can most benefit from services of Friends of the Children, who can benefit from having a friend, with them through their entire academic career. That consistency, I think, is absolutely invaluable. Another thing that I think about that, that can help shore up some of the gaps in our youth services, something that All Nations doesn't provide, is this specifically targets very young children. So the friend is introduced very early on in this child's life. All Nations provide services mostly to middle school age kids and then above. But that has really been an opportunity for collaboration that I've seen with Ben and his team is how All Nations can also provide some culturally tailored, culturally appropriate help to help navigate to those younger kiddos, because I think it really does make the most difference when we intervene in the lives of very young children. I also really see, having that consistency of a friend as a prevention model for suicide with our youth. It's absolutely no surprise to anyone here that there is an epidemic of suicide with our Native youth. And I think having someone who is there with them through the difficult transitions of life, who is available to them, who also spends a lot of time in their emotional labor with them to help them process hard feelings. I think that is an absolutely invaluable service that Friends of the Children is able to provide, especially to our Native community. And so I think Ben and his team, they've really fast-tracked a lot of the work that they've been able to do with Friends of the Children in, maybe the 18 months that they've been in Western Montana. And I think we're going to see the ripple effects of the Friends of the Children, especially in our Native community in several years and in several really impactful ways. Like Ben mentioned, there are a lot of really great ways that Friends impact children. Number one being to sort of lift these kiddos out of poverty, also helping, diminish the rate of teenage pregnancy. And I think just reducing barriers generally for all children, but especially those barriers that our Native kiddos face in the education system. So I'm really proud to be a board member of Friends of the Children. I'm really glad that Ben stepped up into this position. And again, I think there's just a lot of really interesting ways that we can intersect the work between our culturally appropriate services at All Nations and with other Native organizations and the work that Friends does. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions, but that's what I had for you.
Any questions for Sky before we continue on?
Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. How many members do you have on this board or this group? I think it's probably a very positive and a very good program, but you're located in Missoula. So if you're working with a child, say up in this area, I see a disconnect problem because when those kids are in need, so do you recruit mentors in the community so there's someone stationed there so those kids have a safe place to go?
Yeah, that's a really, really important question, and we'd love to spend a little bit of time kind of talking through that. Just to kind of preview that, though, our focus is on hiring mentors who are members of the local community and share ethnic and cultural attributes of the children that they're serving. So, our focus would be if we were to enter a new community, first of all, we need to build relationships and partnerships and to be welcomed. That's, part of our initial series of conversations that we're having. But then the focus is on how do we set up this program in a way that can really maximize the impact in the local community. So the program would be here, it would be centered here in this area. Hypothetically, as we talk through this, and it would be led by local community members.
Are you familiar with Donnie Wetzel?
I have heard the name, but I am not personally. No.
He's kind of moving on that same, it might be something you guys could Google him and get in contact with him. He's been pretty active in trying to do stuff for tribal communities and stuff, so.
Oh, I appreciate that suggestion. I'll reach out. If there are no more questions for Sky, thank you, Sky, for sharing your perspectives on this work. I appreciate it. What I'd like to do now is to transition to hear from my colleague Tasha, who's the National Director of Tribal Programs at Friends of the Children. I'm not sure that I mentioned when I started, Friends of the Children we're part of a national network of chapters. We're about 30 years old. We started in Oregon to begin with. And so, we're seeing really tremendous growth around the country as communities, recognize the value and impact that this model of mentoring can have. Tasha's doing amazing work working with tribal communities around the country. And I'm really appreciative of her joining us this afternoon. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to her for her to share.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Tribal Council, for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all today. I apologize that I'm not in person. I'm in DC with some meetings, but happy to share with you all about Friends of the Children. As Ben said, my name is Tasha Friday. I'm the National Director of Tribal Programs for Friends of the Children. I am Wichita, Kiowa, and Caddo from Oklahoma. I'm also Hunkah, Oglala, Lakota, and I live on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Before coming to Friends, I worked with tribal youth programs and juvenile healing to wellness courts across Indian country, providing training and technical assistance. So I've been able to take a look at a variety of programs, whether they're intervention or prevention, across Indian country and tribal communities, and see what works and doesn't work, and where our challenges are as Indigenous people. When I decided to take on this new endeavor and leading the expansion into Indian country for Friends of the Children, what really spoke to my heart and my spirit was that, one, like Sky mentioned, never heard of Friends of the Children. And I was like, wait, paid professional mentors, people get paid to mentor youth. A lot of us have been doing that work for many years unpaid, but I was like, who gets to have their only job is to have a positive impact on youth, and they're paid a livable wage? Then in looking at the model, which is Western evidence-based, it's been studied by Harvard and Notre Dame and all of these great places, I really leaned into how much more effective can this model be when it's grounded in our culture and life ways. And I'm really fortunate to know that and be supported by the national network that we're able to do this. So as Ben mentioned, we've been in existence, we're going into our 30th year here. And there have been Indigenous youth that have been mentored across those 30 years, but never in a very intentional, specific way. And so that's what we get to do right now. So as part of that effort, I wanted to share with you all what's happening with the Oglala Sioux tribe and the Friends of the Children Hesapa chapter. And as you can tell, even from the name, the Hesapa is the traditional Lakota word and name for the Black Hills. So everything from the name of that chapter to the executive director and staff to the board to the children that we will be serving is all grounded in Indigenous culture and life ways, specifically for that chapter, Lakota culture and life ways. And so the way that I look at it is that the Friends of the Children model is well proven, and it's the seed. Our culture is the soil, and how are we going to cultivate and nourish each other to grow into something beautiful for our youth? And so we're really seeing the national model morph into something that's very indigenized. In this chapter, as you guys mentioned, the concern with who we're hiring Indigenous folks that are grounded in culture and language and all of those things, so that the youth have that strong identity, which is a protective factor for them. And so very excited about that. We've created new positions that have never been seen at Friends of the Children before. We have a cultural advisor who is a Wakanyeska, or a medicine man, for lack of a better term, who will be guiding the work that we do. As children come into the program, we'll do a formal making of relatives, a hunka ceremony, and give them their Lakota names to start at age 4 to 6. And then as they transition into adolescence, we'll have coming of age ceremonies for the young men and the young women to talk to them about their roles and responsibilities to community and the importance that they have. So I think when I look at different tribal communities, we're only limited by our resources and imagination, and resources is something that we definitely bring to the table at Friends of the Children. Ben has worked very hard to start fundraising for the potential of bringing this model into your community. And so that is kind of our form of a giveaway, right? We want to make sure that we are offering you the best of what we have, so that we can invest in the children of your community and the future generations. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, Ben. The other thing in the ways that I'm looking at this is we are wanting to be good relatives. I like that about Friends of the Children. They didn't call it that, but we know that that's what it is. And so only coming in when we're welcome, not coming empty-handed, making offerings to the community, and trying to do things in a good way. The other important thing that we've done with the Oglala Sioux tribe is that we, in coming here today, of course, recognize and respect tribal sovereignty, and that, your youth are your most precious resource. And asking for support for us to be welcome in. For the Oglala Sioux tribe, that looked like a formal resolution of support from their tribal council. And so other places that's looked like a letter of support, or just a verbal saying, yes, we welcome you into our community, but we don't want to move forward without acknowledging your role as leaders and tribal sovereignty at its very core. And so the other piece to that, a lot of the work that we've done right now is this is very new, is in the plains. So with the Lakota culture, one thing that I really lean into is the idea of the Pteoyate, our buffalo relatives, and how when they're in danger, the herd's in danger, they surround the young buffalo calves to protect them. So how are we as Friends of the Children becoming part of that buffalo circle? How are we raising and helping to be good relatives to these young people, to make them resilient enough to put their head down and go towards a storm like the buffalo? Because we know life will always have challenges and storms, but how are we preparing them to deal with that? And so for our relatives that are more of salmon culture, Pacific Northwest, those things, or canoe culture, I'm thinking, well, who's in the canoe with this young person? Is the young person in the middle? How are we coordinating our strokes so that we're moving forward in a good way? If we're thinking salmon culture, how are we really perpetuating the strength of a salmon to swim upstream for the continuation of the generations of their people, right? And so how are we empowering youth and communities in that way? And then finally, I'll say, I don't know, I think there's maybe one more slide, Ben, I apologize. As Sky mentioned, we are really committed to our 2-generational approach. And to me, that's our extended kinship systems that we know have served our people well since time immemorial. And so again, in the Indigenous chapters, we've kind of shifted from saying friend to relative. And this is a relative that's not only going to be with them 12 years plus, no matter what, but we know in Indian country, when we make relatives, that's for a lifetime. So they have this extended support system for themselves and their family that's going to move forward with them. And so that's super important. And so we definitely want to develop those community partnerships and creating relationships like we're trying to do today, to make sure that we're not just coming in and plopping a model and saying, hey, this is going to work for your community. We want to know what you think, what your visions are, what your cultural resources are. And we want to empower by providing that local staff and local input as well for the Hisapa chapter. We'll have 2 locations. One is in Rapid City, South Dakota, and one's on the reservation. For each of those, there'll be a community advisory board, because although it's like 90 minutes away, our relatives in Rapid can't speak for our relatives on the reservation and vice versa. So we want community partners to really guide the work that we do. And we want to empower families to dream, and children to dream. And I think that's, something that we can all resonate around, is that a lot of times in our tribal communities, our youth are never given the power to dream and envision what could be for them. They're told a lot of times, whether it's by statistics or teachers, things like that, that what we can't do and what deficit we're at. But what is our strengths-based approach to how we're working with young people and families? Again, we do want to prioritize culture and language to whatever extent each community is comfortable with or has the knowledge. As we know, in Indian country, it runs the spectrum by no fault of our own. Some of us are more culturally connected than others and connected to our language. For instance, the tribe that I'm enrolled in, the Wichita affiliated tribes, we no longer have any fluent speakers. So we understand that. And what ways can we support revitalizing those languages? And of course, those family systems. I really think that this work is about reconstituting family systems. And as we all know, with the impending ruling on ICWA, one of the main goals of Friends of the Children is to keep youth out of the foster care system. And so while we may not have control over what the Supreme Court is going to rule on ICWA, we do have the power to be preventative and make sure that our children don't ever get in that system. So it's never even a question of whether they'll go to an Indigenous family. So I'm very passionate about that piece of the work as well. And then finally, we do want to create a space that's a clubhouse, that's a second home. And as we know, for our young relatives that are struggling, and the families that are struggling, this may be their first home. We want to create this safe space. Again, just making the parallels to the Hisapa chapter. We referenced the teepee and the way that the Lakota people set up the teepee. Each pole represents a tribal value. And so when we put our children in those teepees, they know that they're surrounded by the value and the love of their people. And that's the kind of space that we want to create in every community, whatever that looks like for the nation or nations that are represented. We want to make sure that we're exemplifying that and amplifying that for the children. I think that was my last slide, Ben, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And any questions for Tasha? Thank you for sharing, Tasha. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carol.
What is the cost?
Sure.
Right.
Well, that's actually a great segue to the next slide. So we are privately funded for the most part, and the cost per child is in the range of $10,000 a year. And so we have, before we launched our operations in Montana, we raised over $1 million in seed funding to help us sustain operations and build capacity around development and community awareness. So
I'm just wondering, I see Patricia Hibbler back here. It seems like we would have to have, before I would consider a letter of support, some buy-in by what the staff is doing and how this would work in conjunction with what they're doing, and have a better understanding of that. And then also we got like the Boys and Girls Club and things like that I'm wondering. I mean, they do mentoring and they do a lot of things like that also. And we raised a lot of money to make sure that we had facilities for those kids to go into, and did pretty good. I don't know if if you've heard of them or know about
Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know Eric and Amy on a little bit, and we're actually starting to explore the idea of partnering. In many locations around the country, we actually will partner with like Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Boys and Girls Club, because what we see that the children that we're focused on serving have, you know, the highest risk factors. They've all experienced multiple compounding childhood traumas early in their lives. They have the lowest protective factors. We're looking for children who do not have a single consistent adult in their life. And that's part of the focus of providing a relative or friend to each child. And so what we see is that in some situations, we're actually then partnering with organizations like a Big Boys and Girls Club, where they're children who have big behaviors because they're traumatized and they're scarred by their situation. We're able to work with them in a more intensive way, one-on-one. This is all about one-to-one relationships and being that consistent presence throughout their school-age childhood. So we view it as very additive and complementary.
I think that would be something that would be welcomed here, as long as it's within the culture and the traditions of the Salish, Kootenai, and Ponderi people. But also, lately we've had a lot of loss, a lot of young people, whether it's drugs, alcohol, just unfortunate situations, taking their own life, suicide. And it's been awful. It has been the awfulest ride, I think. And I think it's not just here, it's across this nation. It's going on. And so I think, you know, what you do is bring hope into the room, that maybe there's a chance for kids who are really, really screaming out, needing help. And a one-on-one is going to probably help the situation. I'm hoping, and I'm praying for that.
Yeah, I join you in those prayers. That's why we're doing this work. I think, you know, looking at, and I'd love to spend a few moments talking about our outcomes. This is an evidence-based model of work. What we see is that children who join us on this journey through the program, they have very low rates of thoughts of self-harm, especially as they enter their teenage years. We have very low rates of substance use and illicit drug use in the children who are in our program. And so from our perspective, and I'd love to have Sky or Tasha add to this, but a lot of this is grounding our work at an early age, building that loving relationship with each child, connecting them to their culture and community, and really celebrating them and their family and their culture. That's what this is all about. And then to build that resiliency over time and to really impact that generational change. So, Tasha or Sky, do you have thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I can jump in. Oh, sorry, Tasha, go ahead. I love Zoom world. I was just going to mention that, you know, that is something that we at All Nations really try and promote in our community too, is just that connection between the two gens and how that can be such a protective factor. You know, especially in urban area, All Nations really was created to be a safe landing space for people coming off the reservation and into urban areas, when we had essentially the Indian Removal Act .2, when a lot of Native folks got kicked off their reservation, off of their homelands, and were forced into urban areas. So All Nations was created in that spirit to connect folks back to their culture, to have a safe space where they could practice their heritage and be connected to themselves and to one another. And I see that really following through with Friends of the Children as well, is that there is such a need for that connection, that there is such a priority to connect those kids back to their culture, to increase those protective factors of that child throughout their lifetime. And so I just wanted to mention that I think that is absolutely a value that All Nations has, and that Friends of the Children also stands in solidarity with.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Patty Hibbler, and I'm the Director of Tribal Member Services. Just wanted to jump in from what Carol said, and we do have a number of youth hurting, and we see that across the nation with many tribes. I would like to have the opportunity to work with Ben and do a little bit more exploration about the program itself and see how it might interface with what we already have going. I've got a list of questions that I won't go through, but things that kind of pop off of my head, and really looking at what's that evidence base that you're using to start your program. How do you recruit? How are people trained? what's that quality control once they're placed one-on-one with a youth? So certainly things that we as a tribe look at in protecting and wrapping our arms around this youth, and what makes sense for us to move forward to do that together as we look at the future for our youth. So more than willing to come in and do that exploration and then make some recommendation to council along with our programs. Also want to take a moment and say to Sky, very familiar with urban Indian centers. My mother was actually the first director of the Missoula Indian Center before it was renamed to what it is now. And then I come from 17 years as director of the Phoenix Indian Center. So love to see what you're doing in Missoula. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you for that connection. That's great to hear.
I would very much welcome the opportunity to work with you. I think those are all really important questions. If there's time, I would love to spend just a few minutes addressing a couple of those points. They are actually part of the presentation, so, and then we could continue the conversation. Are we out of time?
We actually trying to stay on the agenda because they
Okay.
So if we can start wrapping it up, and she said she would meet with you guys regarding it to
That,
come back.
that would be wonderful. Oh, I see. You're trying to get out of town. Okay, let me then just scroll ahead because we were talking about evidence-based outcomes. Actually, I wanted to highlight one of our highlights from this last year was actually we spent an amazing afternoon at the Bison Range. We were really focused on having great experiences for our children and connecting them to their culture and heritage. I wanted to specifically call out Emily Rorlach, who's an amazing host. We learned so much from her that day. So this is a picture of us at the Bison Range, so just in passing. So in terms of our evidence-based approach to mentoring, where we're going with this long-term is, putting each child on a path to health and well-being and success in their lives. And so what we see is as children exit their journey in our program is that more than 92% of the children go on to enroll in higher education, secure and sustain living wage employment, or enlist in the military and serve our country. We see that more than 98% of the children delay parenting until after their teenage years. More than 85% of their parents who we're working with had their children when they were teenagers. So that's a big shift. And then more than 93% stay out of involvement with the juvenile justice system. And the last thing I wanted to share is just, we do a caregiver survey as part of our evidence-based approach to this work. And so we're checking in with families in a pretty, in a relatively formal way each year to hear from them and get feedback on the program. And so at the 2-year mark in the program, we see that more than 95% of the children nationally, regardless of whether these children are in rural Oregon or New York City, we see them and their families describing that they feel a deep sense of belonging to their culture and community. They're accomplishing things they're proud of, and they're attaining overall success in their school performance. So this is at 2 years in the program. So, as a new chapter, we're really focused on how big of an impact can we have in these first 2 years. And so we're really keyed in on seeing this type of growth. And we're really seeing that in the work that we're doing with our youth. Kids who are going through a lot, but we're really seeing them grow and demonstrate positive social emotional growth and resiliency. We have children who are really able to now engage in their classroom studies and work. And I think, there's that support is really meaningful to them. So I want to thank all of you for your time and your attention. I'm very grateful and honored. I'm going to look forward to continuing the conversation with council.
Ed, can I ask you one question? Your seed money,
Yes.
your givers, can you share who they were?
Absolutely. So we have benefited from funding from state and regional companies like Shields and Blue Cross Blue Shield, a number of local banks like First Interstate Bank, a family foundation here in Montana, the Tykeson Family Foundation. And then, we've also benefited from support from our national network as they continue to really, positively support the work that we're doing here in Montana. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, there was one other funder that we've secured this year that I should highlight. The Montana Board of Crime Control just provided us with a 3-year grant to expand our work into rural areas.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to have a comment. This work that you're doing, and I'm just looking through your materials, it sounds so wonderful, and I just am a huge believer in the earliest intervention possible, and that prevention is key, and that prevention is easier and more effective than once someone is in the system to get them out and to turn them on a different path. I think it's so much easier to prevent them to keep them on a good path rather than years later trying to course correct. Not that it's impossible, but it's just easier and it's more effective. And so I just think it sounds like you're doing really wonderful work. And one thing that I do know that I think this model that you're presenting really appears to do is help kids feel visible and heard. There's so many kids that just feel invisible and no one pays attention to them. And this program provides them a way of feeling important, feeling like they matter, knowing that they matter, and having a positive connection. Sounds like a wonderful program.
That's absolutely what this is about. It's that connection and love. It is about love. Thank you for saying that.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sky. Tasha, thank you so much for your work. And Patty, we look forward to the research and a report back on this.
It's worked out great.
Thank you for coming to Montana and Western Montana.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. It's an honor to do this work every day.
And thank you for the cookies.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Please eat all of them.
Oh, boy. We'll try.
Okay. Best wishes. Take care. Enjoy your field trip.
Thank you. All right.
We have Shane and Kylie on.
Okay. Shane, are you there?
I am. Good
Okay.
afternoon. Hey, good afternoon, council members. It's a great honor to be here with you today to introduce my good friend SK Rossi and Kylie Gursky. SK was there in the trenches with me at the legislature for years, doing great work with ACLU in the past, is now branched off and doing their own thing at this point. But SK and I both went to law school together, just an amazing person, and wanted to give back to the community. And so it's with great honor and great pleasure to be able to introduce both of these two special individuals. Kylie grew up in Polson and is currently the program director for the Montana Women's Foundation. SK is the owner of Central House Strategies, now a political consulting firm. And as I mentioned earlier, graduated law school with me. So with that, I would just like to hand it off to SK and Kylie to kind of give a little bit of background on what they're planning to do here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Council. Thanks, Shane, for that introduction. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk with you. We had hoped to be there in person. I don't know if the snow is falling in your neck of the woods, but it started around noon here today. So we just sort of made the decision to stay put and join via Zoom. So apologies for not being there in person. We're here today because we want to share our intention with you to support the tribe's land buyback program. My partner and I bought a house in Missoula in 2017 and had the pleasure of living in the Missoula community for the past couple of years. And we recently sold our home in 2022 when, as Shane said, made the decision to move to Helena. From living in Polson myself and our opportunity to live in Missoula, we know that those places are special places to live. And I think that we recognize that they're special places to live because the Salish, Kootenai, and Pend Oreille people have stewarded that land and have a relationship to that place, and their presence and their stewardship make those places special. And we are hoping just to recognize the traditional lands of the people where we live and where we bought our first home. And for us, I think it's important that that recognition comes also with action. So in order to buy our first home, we received a cash gift from a family member to make a down payment. so that we could purchase that home and build wealth. And what we'd like to do in recognition is return that gift that helped us do that to the tribe's buyback program. So it was a $25,000 gift that we were able to use to make a down payment on our home. And we'd like to return that gift to the tribe to support, again, like I said, your land buyback program. And I think for us, it's important just to share that we see it as an act of solidarity with the tribe and your efforts to correct years of policies that have fragmented the tribal lands, and just to sort of acknowledge that piece of our history and to take one small step in sort of reconciling that history and one small step toward justice. And I think we also, as Rossi and I were talking about it, one of the things that we thought about is just how white communities and white families have the privilege to build wealth and support wealth, and support the accumulation of wealth through the housing market, through stolen lands. And we firmly believe that if you made money on the housing market in Missoula or surrounding areas in the Bitterroot, that a portion of those proceeds should go back to the tribe. And we'd like to see this as our own piece of action, but maybe as setting an example for us to do more and for others to do more in that area as well. So, yeah, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, thank you so much. I mean, your expression here is so appreciated, and yeah, it's very powerful. So running into people with your self-esteem level is very rare, and so we humbly accept your gift to us, and thank you so much. I'd have any other council members that would offer any comments, but what a wonderful gift. Thank you so much. Wow. I really hope it does. You know, this kind of pay it forward would show role modeling something that's really wonderful. So yeah, it can really help us. It could really start something. So thank you, Lem, and anybody else. Go ahead, Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the council. And once again, I just want to thank you. Thank you for your generosity and those kind thoughts. We really appreciate you, and it's really good to know that there's people like you out in the world. It really makes our heart feel good that you've thought about us and approached us in this way. So thank you, and God be with you.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yeah, you know, I'm pretty new to tribal council, just hitting a year mark, coming up on my year of being in tribal council. And so many people come to the tribal council asking for things. And so it's just really heartwarming to have people come here giving something back to us. And that's really meaningful, and that's really powerful, and that's really special. And that really means a lot to us. Thank you so much.
Carol?
Yeah, I also want to thank you and just say that, you know, not too often do people surprise me, but yeah, I just really appreciate it, because buying back our homeland has been the number one for this tribe since I've been on the council, which is a while now. And I just thank you on behalf of the Salish, Kootenai, and Pend Oreille people, because without a homeland, we lose our language, we lose our culture, and we've almost lost it, you know, but we're working very, very hard to turn that around, and it costs a lot of money to do that. And so when something like this comes by us, and it's emotional, because you know, it doesn't happen too often. So I just want you to know how much, on behalf of the people, we appreciate this gift. Thank you.
Thank you. We feel lucky. We feel very lucky to be able to do it.
Yeah, despite even knowing Shane, you know, that's an incredible thing. It's absolutely a miracle. So with that, go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, it is a miracle, right? I'm just so grateful to have crossed paths with some really special people. And got to know SK and continue to work with SK and other capacities as well. And both Kylie actually and SK. So, really grateful to know them. And honestly, SK's been reached out to me a while back about this. And I know Kylie and SK have been wanting to do this for quite some time, and really, really grateful that, now is the time and that this is happening. Another thing that they've talked to me about, Mr. Chairman and council members, is a real rent program. I know that I believe housing is doing something with real rent. I think the Duwamish tribe has a program where people can actually donate into a program, part of their income or the rent into a program to support the tribes in their efforts for housing or whatever particular needs, social service needs they might have. I believe there's some things already happening on that front, but SK and Kylie have said that they would be interested in helping with that effort as well. So we've discussed the possibility of, if there's resources needed to help possibly build like a web page to support something like that. So I'm going to connect them with Jody to see if there's any opportunities there to continue to assist with that as well.
Yeah, Shane, we would, and Mr. Chairman and council members, we would be really excited to be supportive in whatever way we could be to get that rail rent program up and running, including financially contributing to development of the website, to trying to boost some advertising in the Missoula area to get some attention to the rail rent program and get people paying into that program who are living on tribal lands in Missoula and the surrounding area. We've been contacted by the tenants union in Missoula, and they're also interested in being supportive if there's a way for them to do that. So however we can help get that program up and running, coordinate advertising, or whatever it may be, where we would love to be useful. So you guys just say the word and we'll talk to Jody and do whatever would be helpful to y'all.
Wow, that's wonderful. Greatly appreciated. We'd love to be able to tell your story. You're just such great role models. I just can't believe it. It's what a great demonstrative effort that you've done here. So thank you so much. And I don't know what else to say. It's just wonderful. It's just really something. So go ahead.
Well, we appreciate you all, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to show solidarity in this way. It means a lot to us too.
Love to be able to have you come to our quarterly meeting and be able to gift you with something, if that's okay.
Absolutely. We'll do whatever sounds good to y'all. We're at your service.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Shane, for getting this all together. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shane.
Everybody take care. Oh, and I guess I should have just said, we put the check in the mail today, so it should be hitting your executive offices sometime in the next few days.
As long as you didn't give it to Shane. We'll be okay.
No, I didn't. I would never.
It's going directly to Rick's office. So, we'll keep an eye out on, we'll make sure our staff keeps an eye out for it in the mail.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everybody. And thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I have one quick resolution request from Patty, and then we need to go into executive for legal.
Sure. Okay. What do you got, Patty? Do we have it? We don't have it.
Yes, please. Thank you for squeezing me in for this and for Dan and his legal team for allowing me to take a few minutes of their time. It shouldn't take long at all, but what I'm asking for is approval of a resolution for the 2023 to 2026. It's a 3-year grant for Title VI, which is our elder services. On August 30th, you passed a resolution for our elders,
random sampling of our elders to participate in a needs assessment survey. And that data certainly populates this grant that's due on Tuesday. So Elder Services is busy writing. I believe the intent was to make sure that the language in the first resolution was to entail both the survey and the application. There is language on the second page under Be It Resolved that just says that you're requesting the funding, but it doesn't actually say that you approve the submittal of the application. And so from being grant writers in the past, sometimes they're looking for specific language. They want the box checks. And that's why I'm bringing a second resolution in front of you today that specifically says that you approve the submission of the grant.
Motion by Len to approve the resolution. Second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous?
Thank you.
Easy peasy. All right, Dan. We're going to move into executive session.